Hey guys, we've recently partnered with the social media platform Go Wild to combat mainstream social media censorship. If you're tired of having your hunting and outdoor posts taken down and flagged, be sure to check out Go Wild, which was built by outdoorsmen and women just like you. Go Wild is a free social community. Not only are your photos not censored, but they are also encouraged on Go Wild. Go Wild gives you points for things like sharing your trophies, gear reviews, and inviting friends. As you earn more points, you unlock awesome rewards such as gift cards, free swag, knives, and huge discounts on brands like Garmin and Vortex. Oh, and if you create a free account, you can unlock $10 just for trying it out. Use code HTW to receive 10% off your order today. Download Go Wild at gowild.com or in the App Store.
To hunt the wild, to hunt the wild, gonna hunt the wild.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt the Wild podcast. I'm your host Adam Bowlds, and today I'm joined with Evan Grimm. How you doing, Evan?
Doing pretty good, Adam. Pretty good.
I was just gonna have you introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we'll roll into the show.
All right. Yeah. So currently I'm living in Alaska. I grew up in northern Pennsylvania, and work that I do in Alaska is basically aviation and building. Do a lot of stuff around the state of Alaska, and I enjoy hunting and fishing, and really like to get after it and experience the outdoors. So, yeah.
So how'd you get involved in hunting in the outdoors? Is that something you got involved in as a kid, or were you more of an adult onset hunter?
Like most people in the outdoor industry, I got started just as a little kid going out with my dad. My dad used to take me out specifically going after spring turkey. That's how he started us. Like we'd go out and spring turkey hunt with them. And then right about when I got to 11 years old, Pennsylvania has a mentored youth program. And so at that point, I started to go out with him more regularly during deer hunts. And yeah, so that's basically what started. And then I would say once I got into my teens a little farther, right around 15, 16 is when I really started to get serious about hunting. Really tried to go after it and try to harvest some good animals. So yeah.
Was turkey hunting the first thing you were introduced to? Or did you start off
And
with small game or anything else?
I did go after small game a fair amount, and my dad used that more as of a tool of just like we'd shoot 22s at squirrels,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a tool that he used just to help us like really dial in when we were shooting,
Mm-hmm.
um, just to make us really precise and really think about what we were doing, and then we started hunting turkeys. I also got involved in like competitive turkey calling contests as well.
Oh
I
yeah.
started doing that when I was, I think when I was 10, and we would go just basically from fairground to fairground and enter into some of those, and it was fun, and it helped a lot just to actually compete a little bit because you start to really pay attention to what you're doing with the turkey call in your mouth, and then I actually got to the point where I was so excited about it. I was like, hey, what if I just raise some turkeys? So so I actually we grew up on a hobby farm, and I actually bought some turkeys, and like I just listened to them like talk outside, and I'd throw a diaphragm in and start calling to them. So it was fun.
Did that help you out, you think? Listening
I
to
think
them all the
so.
time?
I think so, because like you would do something and you'd see how they react to it, and that was really helpful. I mean, domestic turkeys are, really dumb compared to the actual wild turkeys, but you could
Yeah.
still see how they were like looking around and like if they were gobbling at whatever I was doing. So, yeah.
So I've seen people like you that are like professional turkey callers and all that stuff. Did you ever get to where you could do it without a diaphragm call? Can you do it just free mouth or no?
So this is what I'll say. Before I used a diaphragm, I was actually pretty good with just my mouth. But once I started using a diaphragm, it was just like almost all the skill that I had with just my mouth just went away because I just got used to using that diaphragm all the time. So
Is there
yeah.
a certain kind of diaphragm call that you favor more than others?
Oh, for sure. Um, I think a lot of people, and I'll say this at least for people that are starting out with a diaphragm, um, I would try to pick up a prophylactic call. Um, there's calls that are latex, and I find them quite a bit harder to blow. They're more rigid material, whereas if there's a prophylactic, that material is a lot thinner, and it's a lot easier to get sound out of, and you can be a lot more crisp with it too. Um, a latex tends to be a lot lower, more raspy. And if you're looking for like a real crisp, clear call, I really like the prophylactics. And then as far as cuts go, I really like the bat wing cut. And then if you really want to get good at cutting, so like with the diaphragm in your mouth, cutting like a hen cutting, um, you have that bat wing and then just a little slit right down the center, just a really short little slit about as deep as that bat wing goes. And that's, to me, that's my perfect call. I love that. Yeah.
Did you ever win any competitions?
I have actually, and uh, I'm not saying this to be boastful, but I actually didn't lose. Um, I got to a point where I probably shouldn't have been competing at fairs anymore.
Mm.
and, and it got to a point where it was like, all right, I'm either going to take this to the next level or I'm just going to go out and hunt. And that I chose to go out and hunt. There were some factors with that as well. My family, I grew up in a Christian family, and we really like to spend Sundays together. And if I was to continue going after competition with turkey calling, I would have had to leave the family on Sundays. So, um, so that was the reason that I let it go.
So I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about growing up in Pennsylvania. I hear that the hunting culture there is really thick. Is that true or?
Yeah. So I can only speak to my family and like the people around my family. Um, but Pennsylvania hunters take hunting really serious.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of people that there's just like generational tradition of hunting. Um, so that's been my experience. Like I come from like all the people that I grew up around, like my grandfather, my dad, my grandfather's father, like all of them hunted. My uncles hunt, um, and that's not uncommon for Pennsylvania. That's pretty normal. So, and then as far as culturally, like what to expect with hunters, it ranges too. The culture that I grew up in was, you know, go after it, like get off the road, go in a couple of miles, um, really scout hard if you have the time to, and just go after it. And then so there's that category, and then there's all the way to people that just go out and sit in their tree stand. Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I think that's cool that people are still going out and hunting. So that's I'd say that's the range of it. Actually, though, Pennsylvania, I like to give this as a little bit of contrast. Pennsylvania gets like 830,000 plus hunters every year.
Wow.
That's in state and out of state. And contrast that to Alaska. Pennsylvania has more hunters than Alaska has residents. And
That is weird.
Alaska is over 2 times the size of Texas. So it's pretty crazy the amount of hunters, in state and out of state that come into Pennsylvania. So,
So
yep.
what's the hunting opportunities like in Pennsylvania? Is it a lot of private land or is there a lot of nice public land to hunt? And is it kind of worth traveling to, you think, in your opinion, as an out of state hunter, or is it pretty crowded?
So there's there's a fair amount of public land. I think the last number that I saw was there's close to like 600,000 acres available for public land hunting. What I will say about land specifically is you need to get off the road unless you're okay with bumping into hunters all the time. Like you need to get in quite a ways. And then as far as like a state to travel to, there's some pretty big deer in Pennsylvania. My brother just harvested a whitetail that was over 140 inches. He's
Hmm.
a 6x4 10 point and probably close to 250-pound deer.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so it was a tank. It's a really big deer. Um, but deer like that, like you'll find hunters like my brother. My brother's a really accomplished hunter. Um, you'll find guys that can do that consistently, but it's not normal. It's guys that are really keyed into what they're doing.
How
So
many bucks can you kill in Pennsylvania? Is it a 1 buck state?
um, as far as from what I remember, you're allowed one tag. I'm not sure, that might have changed recently.
Okay.
Um, I haven't hunted as a resident for a couple of years now. Um, but I know it was always a one deer state. We also hunted New York a little bit. New York, I remember they had like you could hunt. You get a tag for archery, rifle, and muzzleloader. So New York had 3 tags. Um,
What's the
but yeah,
price? What's the
yeah,
price for an out of stater in New York? Do you remember? It's
I
pretty
don't remember.
expensive.
I don't remember. Well, so actually, I was born in the state of New York,
Oh, okay.
and my family moved to Pennsylvania when I was young. But before we moved, there was still this thing where somebody could buy you a resident license there. I forget what they actually. It was like a lifetime license, and I got it when I was like 6 years old.
Hmm.
Um, and so like I still get my New York license mailed to me.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So like if you're in New York, I would highly look into like purchasing that if you're gonna move out of state because I don't. It was probably like $400, and I get it for the rest of my life. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's definitely worth it.
yeah, yeah,
So I've heard a lot about blue laws, like not being able to hunt on Sundays in Pennsylvania. Is that still a thing over there, or did they get rid of that? And could you talk a little bit about maybe the history behind why you can't hunt on Sunday in Pennsylvania?
yeah. So blue laws are yeah. My understanding of the blue laws is that they were put in place like almost all the way back in like almost colonial times. Um, and it would the purpose of it was to um, keep people from doing non unnecessary things on Sundays. So the purpose was to encourage people to go to church on Sunday, and to keep them from going out and like shopping and like that type of stuff. Um, so basically, all the history that I've looked at, that's basically the idea of the blue law. Um, Now, as far as hunting goes, they've been drawing that back a little bit every year. So I think this past year, um, you could hunt every Sunday during. I could be wrong on this, but pretty sure you could hunt every Sunday during the rifle season, the deer rifle season in Pennsylvania this past year. Um, I think another exception to that is you can hunt coyotes and crow on Sundays as well.
So I know you said that you like to go to church and stuff a lot on Sundays. So I have to ask your opinion on this blue law thing. Is that something that you feel like they should keep around? Like, do you think they should get rid of it? What's kind of your opinion on that?
Well, so there's like a really legalistic way to look at it, um, and then uh, there's the way that I try to look at it. Like the United States is a free country, right? So um, we, every law is a, it's stepping in on those freedoms. So, in my opinion, yeah, it's fine. It's fine for them to overturn it to Sunday hunting. I'm not upset about that. What it comes down to is like I'm pretty sure my family, even if it's allowed to hunt on Sundays, they're not going to. Um,
Hmm.
it's been a family time together. They go to church, they spend time together, they have a meal together, and it's a time where they just take a break. My family works really hard, and Sunday is like their day of rest. So, um, and like I actually killed a black bear up here on a Sunday, and I felt weird about it. Felt really
Yeah.
weird. I was like, this is like my entire life. I've not hunted on Sunday, and it was actually we were on our way out from a northern pike fishing trip, and this big black bear came down to the water, and we were able to stop the boat, and I was able to get saddled and was able to shoot him. But then I was like, man, like today's Sunday. Like I don't think I've ever killed something on Sunday before. Um, but yeah, so there's a legalistic way of looking at it, like, oh yeah, like shouldn't be hunting on Sundays, but you know, if we're gonna go back all the way to like what it was founded on, it was a Puritan principle of observation of the Sabbath. And when you actually look biblically at some things about, like what Jesus actually said about that, he said that um, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And he said that, I believe, in the context of when he and his disciples had gone and they had pulled grain off of stalks to eat it, and somebody in that time had become really upset about it. And he said, "Hey, it's basically what he was saying. Hey, it's fine for these guys to be getting something to eat. Like it's an act of mercy." And so for me, I really had no problem if somebody's going out and they're trying to provide food for their family. That's not a problem. I don't see it as a problem unless they're, you know, yeah, I don't really see it as a problem. So yeah,
So you're living up in Alaska now. You're a you're a transplant to Alaska. What made you want to move up there?
it actually came about because I interned up here as an aircraft mechanic for a year. And so when I first moved up here, um, I just kind of started looking around, and I was like, you know what, I like it here. I think I'm gonna stay. So I basically within a month of coming up here for the internship, I changed my residency over, and I've been here for most of the time since then. Like I'll go back in the winter a little bit, just get away from the darkness. Really, that's the worst part of Alaska is the darkness of the winter. Um, but yeah, I've been up here pretty much since then. So
So you're if I remember right, you told me that you do a little bit of flying around. You're a pilot, right?
yeah, yeah. So I uh, I got into aviation at a young age. Think think my first flight was when I was 6, and I just basically got hooked on it right away. Um, and so I had this like ongoing desire to be a pilot from age 6 on, and my parents got me involved in some like aviation camps. I got involved with a an organization called the Experimental Aviation Association, and they have a cool thing where they have pilots that are part of their organization that offer free flights to young kids that are interested in aviation. And so I was able to hop in on a flight with that. And then through that man specifically, he was able to link me up with the guy that became my flight instructor. I started taking flight lessons when I was 15,
Oh,
and then
wow.
the the earliest that I could get certified as a private pilot was age 17. And so I actually got certified as a private pilot right before I got my driver's license. Um, so yeah, yep. But yeah, so I got certified as a private pilot, and I actually interned also as an aircraft mechanic for one summer. Um, I think that was when I was 16, and saw that, hey, I like the mechanical side of this too. So the next couple of years, I worked. I was finishing up high school. Then I finished high school. I graduated. What I graduated at age 17, and then I took a gap year. Just worked for my family's companies. My brother runs a tree service business, and my dad is a general contractor. So I worked between the two of those, and I was able to put money away to be able to cover my first year of training as an aircraft mechanic. And I moved to Ionia, Michigan, and uh, actually at that point, to kind of bring along some of the hunting stuff that I was interested in, I had a YouTube channel going at the time. I had been self-filming hunts, and I'd gone out with my brother and filmed some hunts, and that channel at the time was called Master Harvesters. And like, if you go way back through some of my YouTube stuff, like, you can see me just basically as a little kid, kind of figuring stuff out. um, but it's kind of cool. I like to go back now that I'm so far away from my family. I like to go back and just watch them, kind of look back on that. But when I moved to Ionia to Michigan, I just stopped that, like, cold turkey, just like done with the videos. I need to really focus on my school. Um, I went to the School of Missionary Aviation Technology, and they had two 12-month programs. So it wasn't like your normal college of, like, whatever it is, 6 or 8 months, and then you get the summer off. It was like all the way through. And the first year, I think I had like maybe 20 days off the whole year from school. And
Wow.
it was just like really focused work. And so basically that was like a full-time job. And then I also worked for a builder just to cover some of my building expenses when I was in college. And then my last year at college was more flight training. So I already had my private pilot license, and I wanted to continue my certifications, get to commercial pilot. So I started training in August, and then got a tail wheel endorsement, high performance complex. And then within like half a year, I was working on my IFR rating, and then passed the FAA certification test for instrument flight, and then worked the rest of the year and got the commercial pilot certification at the end of that year. So it was a really intense 24 months of just
So
like,
once
yeah.
you're a pilot in one state, is that you can use that pretty much anywhere? Or is there like special training for being in Alaska?
The pilot certification is federal, so
Okay.
you can take it across the United States. Um, I will say, like, from state to state, there are different things that, like, it's good to be aware of. Not really like, well, Alaska is different because they have some different laws, because during, like, in the lower 48, you have like 30 minutes of twilight, really. The sun goes down, and then you got like 30 minutes, and then it gets dark, roughly. Whereas up here, like, the sun's been down for about 20 minutes, and we're gonna have light for like another 2 hours.
Hmm.
So, like, there's some different rules associated with that because we're so far north. So, like, an example of that would be is you can fly all the way, like, basically in the lower 48 if I remember correctly, because I haven't flown down there for a while, but you have sundown and then you have 30 minutes of what's called civil twilight. And then after that, and I could be wrong on this because I haven't looked at it for a while, but after that, if you are um, if you are not night current, technically you shouldn't be flying. Whereas up here, the sun goes down and then the twilight goes all the way until it's actually dark. So, yeah.
So, can you kind of talk about some of the work that you do in Alaska when it comes to like flying and all that stuff? Like, are you transporting cargo? Or are you transporting hunters?
Yeah. So, my aviation work is primarily associated with nonprofit ministry. So it's there's some legal stuff with the FAA that seeing that I'm providing the airplane and the pilot for the flights that I do. I technically I can't have somebody call me up and be like, "Hey, I'm out here and I need you to fly me to Fairbanks." Like I can't actually do that. I would have to be under a company that has a 135 certification, and I could bore you with all the details. But basically, what that is, that's a charter operation, and
Okay.
they're the ones that handle all that type work. What I do is I fly out and I work on stuff. So whether that's using my mechanical training on anything from chainsaws to snowmobiles, or we call them snow machines up here, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, I've heard people call them either or, but
Yeah, yeah. So, chainsaws, worked on putting a truck back together so it can run. And basically, like what happens with the mechanical stuff is it's really expensive to get parts out in the villages. Because you have not only is it expensive to get into the state of Alaska, but then out to the villages, it's like, what's a good example of this? Like a gallon of milk is $18 out in the village. It's really expensive. And so it's just really expensive to get stuff out to the village. So if I know people out there and they're like, "Hey, my truck just broke down. I think it's like such and such. I can see that this is smoking." I'll be like, "All right." And then I'll run into town. I'll pick up the part and then I'll fly out there and I'll help them get their vehicle going or whatever. And then another thing that I do, and this is all associated with nonprofit work. Another thing that I'll do is if somebody has a building project going on, I'll hop in an airplane and go out and help them build. And that was part of growing up. My dad was a general contractor, so I learned all this stuff. And basically, what I'm trying to do up here is use pretty much every skill that I have to help people out. Alaska's not an easy place to live, especially if you're in a village. So, I'll fly out some building materials, I'll fly out parts, and then I'll help with the work out there. So,
could you talk about kind of what kind of plane you're flying? Maybe paint the picture, because I live next to a small airport. I live right on the side of it, but they fly like two-man planes, like nothing real big or
yep.
anything. It's just like a hobbyist kind of thing. Is that the kind of thing you're flying in, or is it something bigger than that?
Yeah, that ranges basically on the job that I have going on. I'm rebuilding an airplane right now, and it's a 4-seat airplane, and it can haul total weight. So that's like if you fill it up with fuel, like that's taken away from how much weight I have available. But total, it can haul 1,000 pounds.
Okay.
So once you put fuel in, I think it's got 42 gallons. So let's just say roughly 120 pounds of fuel. So you're working with like 880 pounds, and then you throw, normally I'm going to be flying with just another person in the airplane. So that leaves me with right around 500 pounds of useful load that I can throw baggage in or whatever. And the airplane that I'm working on getting flying, it's a MAL M4, and it's a really capable airplane as far as like getting in and out of like really short runways.
Hmm.
So like it can land in like 3/4 of a football field.
Oh,
It's
wow.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive on the stuff that it can do. Now, whether I can do that or not remains to be seen, but that's what it's published for. And then takeoff is right around the length of a football field. Now, of course, that's not like loaded up all the way, but um, that's like some of the stuff that it can do. And then also it cruises really fast. So like last year, I did a lot of like just flying out to a village and just going out to build. So it's just me. Tools were already out there. So it's just me and my wife flying out there and just like some clothes in the back. And we were flying this little Cessna 150 and we're going at like 80 miles an hour and just super slow. And then it was so tight that like my knees would start to ache after like 2.5, 3 hours of just putzing along. And then I'd be looking at my ground speed and I'd have like 20 miles an hour of like headwind. And so I'm going like 60 miles an hour. I'm like, what in the world am I doing this for? But yeah, anyway, so this one can fly at like 140, 145 miles an hour. So like that's a really huge step up. As far as my certification goes, I could fly an airplane as long as it's single engine. And as long as it's a piston airplane, I could fly all the way up to 12,500 pounds. So that's a pretty big plane. I definitely want to get like some additional training in that airplane with somebody that's flown it before, but that's as far up as my certification goes. So.
Now, do you ever play around with any like float planes or anything like that? I've got to imagine that landing a plane in the water has to be different than landing one on land.
Yeah, that's my goal eventually, is to get a float plane certification. But I haven't been able to get any of that training at this point. But yeah, it is really useful up here. Like a lot of guys, especially on hunts, they'll fly in a float plane and they'll land on a little lake out in the middle of nowhere and set up camp. Yeah, so it's definitely useful. That's for sure.
So, are you building a plane or are you rebuilding a plane? How's that kind of? What's the whole point of it? Just so you can carry more weight?
Yeah, so basically, I'm rebuilding it.
Okay.
This airplane, it's been on the ground for I think like 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And so there's some history that I'm not real sure of. But my understanding is that it had some sort of an accident, and basically it's just been like one guy's worked on it here, and then one guy's worked on it over here, and I actually have to like, it was never registered by a bunch of the owners that they actually owned it, so I have to go back through and figure out all that paperwork. But where I have it right now and what I'm working on is basically all the major repairs are done, and now I'm just putting the airplane back together. And the reason that I chose to rebuild the airplane was just cost. For me to buy that airplane working and maybe not even working all that well, maybe not having all the great equipment that I'm trying to put into it, it's going to be like 60,000 plus for me to purchase an airplane that size. So that was the biggest thing for me. If I could pick up a project and just work on it, I could save some money. It would take a lot of time, which it is taking a lot of time, but in the end, it would be worth it because I have something that I can sell for much more than I bought it for. So that was my big reason. And then also, anybody that's in aviation, they'll tell you like, aircraft rental is expensive. So I was flying that 150 a lot last year and just putzing along at like 80 miles an hour, and I was spending $100 an hour just to fly that. Um,
Wow.
so if you do the math, like I was flying out to McGrath. McGrath is a primarily white village. Actually, a lot of people that are white live out there, but and I'm not saying that to be racist in any way. It's just what it is. And I was flying out there, and it's like 3.5 hours to get there, and then maybe 3.5, depending on the winds, to get back. So I'm looking at like $700 just to fly out and fly back.
Wow.
And that's a really reasonable rental. Like if I was to fly a 4-seater, I'm looking at anywhere from 160 to 210 plus. A 6-seater, I'm looking at probably 250 plus. So it gets really expensive really fast. And for me, as I was looking into it, I was just like, yeah, I need to purchase an airplane. I'm
Does
going to
that
keep doing this.
does that make
Yeah.
you super nervous to put one all back together and then fly in it?
Yeah, actually, it gives me some degree of comfort actually, because I know the airplane.
Yeah.
I'm a type person, unfortunately, like as I work on something, it's almost like a relationship is built with that thing, which is why it's so hard for me to get rid of stuff that I probably should have sold a long time ago that I keep working on. uh, but this airplane, like I'm just being really super thorough on it, going through and like making sure everything's done right. Um, so I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be well worth it when it's done. And just to follow up on that, like I'm really confident in the work that I'm doing on it. Not that like nothing's going to go wrong, because there's always that opportunity, but I'm gonna dot every I and cross every T and make sure it's ready to go.
So, I imagine it's gotta take some time to get plane parts up there that you're working on this thing. I mean, you don't order them off Amazon, do you? How do you go about getting
No,
stuff in Alaska?
no. So Alaska is a huge aviation state. Um, so that actually helps out a lot. I can get most of my parts in state. For example, on that, I just purchased a new set of wheels because the wheels had like corroded really bad, had really bad corrosion. They're aluminum, and I just purchased them from down in Anchorage. That's like a 6-hour drive, and then they're sending that up, and that should be up here. I think it's supposed to be up tomorrow. Actually, I purchased it last week,
Oh,
so really, it's not bad. And then also a big company that you get a lot of aircraft parts from is Aircraft Spruce, and they actually have a subset of their company up in Anchorage as well. So that's pretty good. And then I'm pretty close to the Fairbanks Airport, and there's a part shop there as well. So there's really quite a few opportunities for me to be able to pick up the parts that I need.
so you ever see anything crazy when flying in Alaska? You ever like had any near death experiences? Maybe not in Alaska, but maybe just flying in general. I mean, you see a lot of cool stuff while you're flying, or are you too high up?
Yeah, I do see a lot of really cool stuff. So like you see a ton of wildlife. Um, like I can't tell you how many swans I've seen in one flight. Like they're like you'll just look down. There's just white dots like all over this lake. And then like you'll see if you're low enough, you'll see the moose. You'll see quite a few moose if you're low enough. Uh, I don't think I've seen a grizzly from the air yet. Um, and they're technically like you need to be pretty low to be able to see the less obvious wildlife. Like you would think that a moose and a grizzly would stand out pretty good, but their color actually helps them blend in really well. So, but yeah, if you get low enough, you see a lot of that stuff, and that's why like if you look up if you look up like aviation in Alaska or something like that, you'll see these guys that are like way low and just kind of cruising along the rivers, and that's where you see a ton of the wildlife. And just like along those rivers is where you'll see them. And then as far as like near-death experiences, I actually last year, as I was flying out of McGrath, actually, so the rental on my airplane was up. It was up that day, and if it wasn't up, I wouldn't have flown. But I knew that I had to get the airplane back, and so I took off. And as I was flying, it's just the weather just kept coming in on me. My visibility just kept getting lower and lower and lower. And I had chosen to fly along the river just for that reason, so I could keep a visual with something the whole time, which that river is just a lot easier to follow. And as I'm flying, I'm just like, man, this is getting bad. Like, so the regulations, I was in class, there's different categories of airspace, and I was flying in what's called Class Golf, Class G airspace, and the limitations for that is you have to be able to see a mile, and you have to be clear of the clouds. And so as I'm flying along, I'm just like, man, I'm getting close to a mile, and I'm really close to the clouds right now. And I just had to keep going lower and lower and lower, which like doesn't sound really all that bad because it sounds like kind of fun to be low, but the lower that you get, the less options you have if you have an engine issue. So if I'm at like 300 feet and I lose power, like I gotta be looking for where I'm landing like right now. Like I have to be like right on top of it. And if you're along a river, like there are sandbars and stuff, but a lot of the times there's trees and other issues like stumps that are out in the sandbars. So anyway, I'm flying along and I'm getting down. I'm getting close to like, because I'm staying out of the clouds up above me and flying along, and I'm just like, man, this is not good. And I'm looking at my map, and I have a moving map, GPS moving map, and I have that on my iPad. And I have that on my knee. And as I'm flying, I'm just seeing, and I look back behind me, and it had closed in behind me as well. So it wasn't like I could turn around and like fly back out of it. And I knew if I flew back, I wouldn't be able to land, because when I had taken off, it was like I set limitations for myself when I'm flying. So like if it's over 25 knots of headwind with a Cessna 150, I'm not taking off. And it was right at like 25 knots. On the other side of that, I won't try to land a Cessna 150 if there's more than 17 miles of headwind, like 17 knots a headwind. And so like it was right at that threshold of 25, and I knew I wasn't going to land back there. So I was just like, I got to keep pushing. So this is all stuff that's going through my head, like just like rattling. And the whole time, like, and the whole time this is happening, I can just hear my flight instructor, inside my head, and he's just like, "This is what gets pilots killed. This is what gets pilots killed." And so, like, visibility just kept getting worse. And I was looking at that moving map, and I saw that I had a mountain on this side, and I had a mountain on this side, and I couldn't see either of them. And at that point, I had to make the decision: all right, am I going to stay down here in the mountains, or am I going to switch over to IFR and get out of here? And in the lower 48, like, that's a lot easier decision to make, because you can base almost at any time, you can switch over a frequency and get an IFR clearance and climb up to wherever you're going and get out of there. In Alaska, you have hundreds and hundreds of miles between the air traffic control stations. And so what that means is when you're in the mountains, like I'd have to get up to like 8,000 feet of altitude just to be able to contact an air traffic control station. And with the temperature that I was flying at, by the time that I got up to 8,000 feet, I'd be in icing conditions. So I'd be building up ice on the airplane. So for me, it was just basically I've got to continue flying, and I've got to get up so I'm up over these mountains, but I can't go all the way up and get an IFR clearance. And so I just had to make that decision. So I did, and I pushed the power in, and I climbed up, and I got up to where, and I could still see, like, I could see down through, and I could still see the ground every once in a while. But it was raining and really low visibility. And at that point, you look out in front of you, and it's just white. And so I just switched over completely to my instrument training and just started flying my airplane, just hold a heading and just keep cross-referencing my instruments. And it got to a point, and that whole time I could still hear my instructor in my head, just like, this is how pilots die. This is how pilots die. And I was just really watching my map, making sure that I was, holding the right heading, wasn't going to fly into anything. And it just got to a point. It was like probably like 10, 15 minutes of that. And I was just like, this is sickening. Like, I was getting sick in my stomach. It wasn't that I was bumping around. It was just like, this is not cool. And so I got to a point where I was like, I really feel like I need to pray. So I just like, Lord, I'm scared. I want this to be done. And I'm not kidding. Within 15 seconds, I popped out, just right out of the clouds.
Just opens
clear,
right up.
Total clear sky. And I'm not making that up. Like, it was just like that. And so I was really thankful, and it lived to see another day. But it was freaky.
You ever worry about running into somebody, like when you're in a plane or like another airplane, when you're in like a situation like that?
Yeah, I would be a lot more concerned about that if I was in the lower 48, just because there's so many more people flying. But up here, kind of like what I was saying with the whole Pennsylvania hunters and like the amount of people that live up here, it's the same thing. Like, there's a lot of people that are flying, but it's really unlikely that you're going to be on the same path, doing the same exact thing at the same exact place. It's pretty unlikely. That said, like, I don't plan on going and doing that again. Like, I don't want to be in that situation. I don't. It was just a choice that I had to make. One of the things that, as a pilot, your number one thing is like, keep flying the airplane. You just can't stop, so you have to make those choices.
So have you been doing any hunting when you're in Alaska, or you just been working the whole time you've been up there?
Oh, I've been hunting. Yeah.
Yep. What's the best time to come to Alaska and go hunting? I hear the mosquitoes are bad. So I imagine the summertime's not a good time.
Yeah. So the mosquitoes are like the worst in the spring, like pretty much like you would imagine. That's when they're the worst. And I'm saying this is from like a Fairbanks perspective, because that's where I spend most of my time. But the springtime is when the mosquitoes are the worst. And as you get into like the summer, there's more light, and the mosquitoes, like, it's almost like the mosquitoes work when the sun's down. Mm-hmm. So like, that sun goes down, it's like, boom, the mosquitoes are right back out. But you get quite a bit of relief from them. And then also, like, you get used to them as well. Sounds kind of stupid, but you kind of get used to like all these mosquitoes just mobbing around. So, but if someone was going to come up, I would say try to hit like early September.
Yeah.
Early to mid-September. And then once you start getting into the end of September, the weather generally starts to get more wet. And then you'll start seeing some snow. Yeah. And then early September is like, that's the perfect time to come up and harvest a moose too. So
What would you
Yeah.
recommend somebody coming up to Alaska for their first time? What would you recommend they hunt?
I think as far as excitement level goes, um, to me, the most exciting would be a moose hunt.
Yeah.
And the reason that I say that is not just because they're such a big animal, but you can just like turkey hunting, like you can call them. And I don't know if you've spring turkey hunted much, but when that gobbler starts gobbling, like, oh man, it's just like you start shaking and everything. Well, with moose, you kind of get that same experience, especially if you can watch them, because you can start calling for them and they'll be like 1,000 yards out, and then like it's crazy how they can hear, but they'll perk up and then they'll just kind of start, they'll just start walking in, and the closer that they get, they'll start to posture up a little bit more and they'll kind of sway side to side, and that's really cool. That's really cool to watch. So that would be my thing, would definitely be a moose hunt. Yep.
So I've heard from a few people, or maybe one person, that you have to have a guide if you want to go hunt Alaska if you're from out of state. Is that true, or are you allowed to just go up there and do a DIY hunt and just kind of go at it yourself?
So there's a few rules along with that. There are three big game species that you cannot hunt unless you have a guide or you have a second degree of kin that's a resident with you. So what that means, so a second degree of kin would be like, um, say my father-in-law wanted to come up and he wanted to hunt. Um, I'd have to be with him. I'd have to be within 100 yards of him if he tried to kill something, or he'd have to have a guide there. And then the three species that you have to have a guide or a second degree kin, I believe, yeah, it's grizzly, obviously. Grizzly's one, muskox, and then I believe mountain goat.
Okay.
So you could technically come up and um, actually I take that back. I think it's Dall sheep. I think it's Dall sheep, not mountain goat. Um, so technically you could come up and you could go after a moose or caribou, um, or a Sitka blacktail down in southeast Alaska, and or actually technically even elk. You could come up after elk and you wouldn't have to get a guide. You could do it on your own. So yeah.
Are you very familiar with the out of state license prices? Just kind of a ballpark range, or
Yeah, so I think a out of state license, I think you're looking at $160 just for the license. And then on top of that, you're going to need to get locking tags.
okay,
Um, and so basically locking tag is it's I think that those are I think for a grizzly it's like $1,000 for a locking tag. For a moose, I think it's $850. Um, if you want to go after muskox, I think that's like $2,200. But those are like the high up ones, and then I think all the other ones are pretty much lower than that. I think a black bear is 650, I think. And then another cool thing about that is, like, say you intended to go after a grizzly, right? But you also had a moose tag, so you get the locking tag, but then there's also like a harvest ticket. So if you're going, say you're coming to Fairbanks, right, and you're going to hunt around Fairbanks, you can get a moose ticket, and you can also hunt grizzly. Well, you have that locking tag for the grizzly, and it's worth $1,000. And if you were to get a locking tag for the moose, it would be $850, right? But you're going specifically after grizzly. I'm probably making this confusing, but you're going specifically after grizzly, and you already have that locking tag, but you don't have a moose locking tag, right? And you go out and you see a moose, and you have the harvest ticket, but you don't have the moose locking tag. You can use the grizzly's locking tag because was more expensive, if it's
Okay.
like more equal value, you can use that locking tag on that animal.
Huh.
So it's not like really rigid. What
Yeah.
you can't do is you can't take two locking tags and combine the value. So,
Okay. Yeah.
but that's pretty simple.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's pretty cool. I've never must be a Alaskan only thing. I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a resident though, like it's crazy, like the freedoms that we have as residents. So like you have that contrast of like what it is to be out of state. So say you're gonna be coming up for a moose, like that's 850 plus 160. So you're looking at like 1,000, roughly around $1,000, right? If I can do that math, yeah, $1,010. But for me as a resident, it cost me $85 to get a resident hunting license, a fur bearer license, a trapping license, and a sport fishing license. Like all that's included in the $85. And
Wow.
then I only have to get the harvest tickets, unless it's a specific spot where I have to get a locking tag. And then there's a discounted locking tag as well. So like pretty much all the hunting that I do is for $85. It's
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
you guys are getting a good deal.
Yeah. Yep.
So, do you guys buy any meat in Alaska, or is it everything you eat you kill?
So last year we did not buy much meat at all, because I harvested two caribou and we ate off of those for a while, and then I killed that black bear and we ate off of that for a while, and then killed a moose this past year with a friend, and we're still eating off of that. Um, the biggest thing about this year is my wife is expecting, and so like that changes the whole like what her body's able to tolerate. So we've been eating some different food. We've been purchasing some meat that's a little bit easier to digest and all that good stuff. So yeah, but normally we're just eating whatever we harvest, and that goes for fish too. Um, like I don't think we've bought fish since we got up here. So yeah.
So, what's one thing you would caution against for somebody coming like an out of stater like me? What would you caution them against when coming up there to hunt? Is there anything they need to be aware of? Obviously, bears.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, actually along the line of bears, and I'll get more into the question here in a bit, but I I had some people wouldn't even call it an encounter, but I experienced being around a grizzly this past summer, and just being around them, like having them within 300 yards, like you realize how how powerful they are. I was fishing for lake trout, and it was late at night, and we could hear this grizzly back in the woods chasing a cow and a calf moose around. And it was just like, and he would just like roar and crashing through stuff, this water splashing, and like it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck, and just like my friends, their eyes were just huge. And it's like when you're around a big grizzly, like I don't know if you've looked at any of the like whenever people have experiences with bears, if they get charged by a bear or mauled by a bear or something like that. But my dad has this really funny and sometimes irritating habit of like whenever I'm going out on a hunt, he'll send me something like that. And what almost all the guys say is like you're never prepared. Like you can spend a ton of time at the range shooting and trying to prepare for this, but I think it was Remy Warren. Remy Warren just said like the only thing that my one friend could do was throw his trekking poles at it, you
Mm-hmm.
know, as
I've
as the
heard that
bear.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I could definitely see how that would happen. Like they're really something to be around. So that would definitely be one thing. Um, but then I think where a lot of people kind of get confused with Alaska is the regulations. Um,
Mm.
while there's a lot of freedoms in Alaska, like you really got to watch the regulations because you can be hunting and a game management unit or wildlife unit, whatever you're used to calling it. And it could be, inside the same unit. Like it could be legal to harvest a moose over on this side of one river, and on the other side, like you can't hunt for another week. And then there could be different antler restrictions inside of that same unit. So it's like really, really important to know that. And on top of that, like the fines are really heavy. So it's really important to really know what you're doing. And then along with that, salvaging. Alaska has some pretty strict salvaging rules as well because they want to avoid people coming up just for a trophy hunt. So an example of that is a couple buddies of mine went up and harvested a caribou. I think it was late September, early October last year, and it was up the Dalton Highway. And there's Dalton Highway. Basically, it runs from Fairbanks all the way up to the all the way up to the ocean, all the way up at the north end of Alaska. And so along that Dalton corridor, it's like 5 miles on each side. You can only hunt with a bow, and then outside of that, you can hunt with a rifle. So my buddies went out and they hiked out 7 miles so they could hunt with a rifle, and they just didn't want to like be right on the edge and shoot them, so they hiked way out there, and they killed a really nice caribou. And then they were gonna throw all their gear into rafts and float back out, and they played it out pretty well. But the river got really, really high and really turbulent, and so on their way out, they ended up getting soaked, and it was I think it was like 30 degrees, and so they like pulled all their stuff out, and it was like raining / snowing, and they're like, we just gotta get out of here. And so they left all their stuff and went out to their truck and then got to a place to warm up and stayed the night there. They called this the state troopers. So Alaska doesn't really have like a game warden, which a lot of people are familiar with. There's the Alaska state troopers, and they take care of all that stuff. So they called them and basically told them like, hey, we still got meat out in the field. We're not going to be able to get it right now. We're going to have to come back and get it. And so they, a couple of weeks later, they got a bunch of guys together. We all went out and got that meat. And what's different about Alaska is in some locations, you have to leave the meat on the bone. So you can't debone it, which means that we were hauling this caribou out, and instead of it being, 80 to 100 pounds, like we're carrying out like 150 plus pounds with the meat and the bones. And that's everything. That's the hindquarters with the bone, that's the ribs, all that good stuff. All of it had to come out. So yeah, that's some of the salvaging stuff.
That's got to be hard on your back.
Yeah, I think my pack that day, because we took survival gear in too, because we didn't really know if the weather was going to go bad. It's hard in Alaska to be able to tell because the weather reporting stations are so far apart. Like I can just like build in between like really, really fast. So we took all our survival gear. I think on the way out, I probably had like a 80 to 100 pound backpack, something like that. Never actually weighed it. I think it was 80 to 100 pounds. That's what it felt like anyway. It was probably like 60 pounds, but
probably gets heavier by the minute, I imagine.
Yeah. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking a little bit about flying and all that stuff in Alaska. I've never had anybody on from Alaska, so I was kind of intrigued by kind of what it's like up there and flying around and doing all that stuff. I'm used to hearing about little small tracts of land and fighting with neighbors, and it doesn't seem like you have that issue up there.
Yeah.
All right. Can you tell everybody kind of where to find you on social media in case they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, you can find me. It's Evan Grimm Writes. And then you can find me on Gab, and that's GAB, and that's just Evan Grimm. And then can find me also on Go Wild, and that's Evan Grimm as well. So I think on Instagram and Gab, it's me in a green sweatshirt, probably holding a pan or something from when I was making a meal out in the woods. And then I think on Go Wild, it's me holding a big northern pike. So yeah.
We love Go Wild. There's no censoring there. We can post all the pictures we want.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. I enjoy it. Yep.
All right, Evan. Appreciate you coming on, and I'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep. We'll see you, man.
All right. Bye-bye.